All right, so welcome to the Not Terrible Show. I'm Eric.
I'm Matthew.
All right, so what's in store this week? What do you got, sir?
Yeah, I think I've had enough of the quarantine here. I'm not sure I'm going to make it.
No.
This is trying to do my part. But,
Yeah, I get it. It's and I guess I feel it's kind of a 50-50 feeling. I'm lucky that I get to go to work and go out and be like out in the public every day, right? But at the same time, like I have to go out and be in the public every day. And who knows, I've had to deal with some pretty sticky situations kind of this week, so it's been challenging to say the least.
yeah, it's like my wife is like, so she just crushed at work,
Yeah.
working in a psychiatric clinic. And it's the point where she's like, oh, I wish I could just sit home, do nothing,
Yeah.
quarantine myself for a few days, like a lot of the people who are doing that sort of thing have no idea.
Yeah.
How isolating it is for other people to not see other people and then go out and have it be weird. Have to wear masks and kind of cover your face.
Yeah.
Some people aren't. And
We got work issued masks, and then my aunt was making masks and sent me a couple of Seahawks masks. So I've got all that stuff covered, but work is making us wear them when we're out in the field now. So good stuff.
my wife bought a couple of the RN95 masks
Mhm.
that are mostly made in China that may or may not be real. Well, hopefully they're real, but they were really expensive.
Yeah.
Like a pack of, what was it? Pack of 20 was $150.
Jumping Jehoshaphat.
She bought like two. So that's like $7.50 a piece.
Yeah, that's spendy. And I mean, I have some N95s that I had from before for other projects, just industrial stuff. And so I used those for a little while, and I would put them in after I was done. Like we went to Costco, and then I got home and I put it in the oven at 160 for like 30 minutes, which they said was okay, but it would only work for about 3 or 4 times, and then they'd be ruined after that. So
Seems like you need a UV light or something.
yeah, that seems to be the standard method. And some places I saw are using the carbon or the what is the hydrogen peroxide mist machines now
Okay.
to do that kind of thing. But I ran out of the N95, so now it's just the cloth face mask like everybody else, and wash it and learn how to set it down and put it on and take it off and all that stuff.
Yeah, I haven't worn the RN95s yet, but I figure I put a cloth mask over it to try to protect it.
Yeah.
If I went out somewhere where I thought it would be high density or high risk.
Yeah, I almost bought one of those because I searched face masks. All of a sudden, my Facebook feed is filled with face mask ads, right? And one of the the neoprene ones that has like the valves and stuff in it that goes around the back. And then I was reading some states. Yeah, basically, I was reading some states were talking about they may disallow masks that have a valve because it's useless. Basically, the point of the mask is to protect other people as much as it is to protect yourself. And if it's got a valve, you're not helping anybody.
You get a little nutty with it.
Yeah, no,
you're not going to control every person and every kind of mask.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Oh,
so yeah, you've had a eventful week at work, or?
Yeah, definitely. So, it was my Thursday, but it was actually Tuesday.
Thursday is Tuesday at Carville.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a new saying. What?
So Tuesday, I was out on patrol, public transit supervisor, and generally my job consists of responding to calls, uh, fixing fare boxes on buses, or meeting buses at a platform to help a passenger on or off or whatever, different things like that. Mostly community outreach stuff between transit and the general public and management of the drivers. And then I do some disciplinary stuff, that kind of thing. But a lot of times it's just driving around and listening to the radio and going where I'm directed. And I had heard a call. I was over near the mall and I heard a call saying that there were two homeless people. A bus driver had pulled up to the stop and two homeless people were fighting at the stop.
Right.
And so I was like, all right. And I heard security chimed in and said, hey, the security guy said, hey, I'm right here in the area. I'll head over that way. And I was like, all right. I'm just listening at this point. I said, I'll head over that way and back him up. So I scooted over that direction, started heading that direction. And we got there and the security guy mostly had it in hand. I pulled up and I didn't go and engage because it looked like he had it under control. I was just kind of there backing him up. And so the two gentlemen had split up and one of them had went across the street and was walking back, and the other guy we had kicked off of our property because he was drinking a beer at a bus stop, and we just said, hey, you can't be drinking a beer at the bus stop, you need to move along. So like, okay. So he started walking across the street. Well, then the other guy, they'd had words before. The other guy comes over and just starts wailing on him with a piece of rebar, a sharpened piece of rebar, and knocked him unconscious and on the ground. And that's when my security officer, right before that, had called 911. And so we were literally right around the corner from the police station. So response time was like 2 or 3 minutes. The cops showed up, and this guy, now we have one homeless guy laying on the ground unconscious, and we have the other guy who is kind of stalking around with a sharpened piece of rebar, and he starts throwing pieces of this rebar at the cops. And so he's kind of stalking back and forth. They tried to tase him, and it had no effect. It stuck to his clothes, and he just brushed it off. At that point, he puts on a jacket, and now the tasers won't penetrate the jacket, so those are useless now. And he's, like I said, stalking back and forth. They're telling him to drop the piece of rebar and get on the ground. He's not complying. He starts to move towards the one police officer. Now, prior to that, as soon as guns came out, like me and the security officer and two other security officers had showed up as well, we backed way up. I was probably 150 or 200 feet down the street. We don't involve ourselves with those types of situations. That's not kind of our role. But either way, all of a sudden you hear it happened. From my angle, it looked different from where I was standing. From what the video, there's a fairly prominent video floating out and about on Facebook. Find and look at the whole incident, or most of the incident, I should say, not the whole thing. The Facebook video doesn't show the other homeless man getting beat, just absolutely beat down with a piece of rebar and lying bloody on the sidewalk.
Right.
But he ends up getting shot 5 times. I shouldn't say he was shot 5 times. 5 shots were fired, if you count them on the video. One of the shots is still lodged in our security van, which is prominently in the video. But the other 4 presumably entered his body. And he wasn't, at that time, he wasn't pronounced dead, but he was pronounced dead at the hospital. So then we kind of, at that point, where the security officer who was still closer to the scene, they kept him there and made statements. He was there for a couple of hours. Since I was farther back, I gave them a general statement of why I was there, but I didn't have any information that they didn't already have.
Right.
And the security guard had done most of the heavy lifting per se. So I left. I came back about 8 hours later. They still had the whole scene taped off. Our vehicle was still there, and we kind of wanted it back. And so I had to go talk to the investigators and ask if we could get our vehicle. They said it was going to be like 3 or 4 more hours. So then that was pretty much the end of it for me, other than coming home and seeing it on the news.
Yeah, you had shared the video with me, and I mean, to me, it looked like the man had started to approach one officer that was by himself on the from the video's angle to the left.
Yeah.
And there was like a bunch of officers to the right, and it seemed like the officer somehow got him to turn around. But as he turned around, somebody from the right group shot him. So that's what it looked like. Like it didn't
So
look like the guy like if that guy had approached him and then he shot him, like it'd be like okay. But he looked like the person that was being threatened. Like the immediate threat was over, and the guy had turned back around, and then it appears they shot him from the left, and then everybody joined in, and
yeah,
another
so
shot rang out, and then he went down to a clump, and they shot him again as he was laying on the ground.
yeah, so
It looks pretty brutal from that.
yeah, so the news articles are saying 3 officers actually fired. So the first officer on the left, and if I watched the video, my interpretation of it was he shot him as he was facing him and still coming towards him. The first shot didn't have basically any effect. It looked like the guy turned around as he was turning around at the same time that he was shot. The second shot was still from the same officer on the left. It looked like in his upper right hand back area, and then he fell down. At that point, the 2 other officers shot, one of them twice and the other one I think once. But again, an unfortunate situation all the way around, definitely. You hear the guy in the video saying, they just need to tackle him, which I don't know. It's hard to second. I mean, the guy was holding a pretty substantial weapon, and it's easy to get stabbed in a situation like that. If one officer, which officer do you don't care if he gets stabbed? Which, granted, that's a profession they chose. But if you're just trading one life for another life, at the end of the day, I don't know. It's in that situation. I don't know how I would have reacted in that officer's shoes. I can't tell you.
I'll share a story of our friends. One of my wife's friends, whose husband is a police officer in I think it's called St. Louis City, near St. Louis, like a really pretty bad area. And he arrived at a call where there was a butt naked dude. It was like almost like 7 feet tall, like muscular, and 2 cops on each arm, and they're wrestling him like they've already tried to, they've already got in too close, and so it's already whatever. So he approaches to try to help, and the guy clocks him and knocks him out cold, and he's got permanent damage. That's permanent damage for him. And he didn't have a weapon. Like, it's not reasonable to, because you can't tell from the video what kind of weapon he has. But if he's got a sharp piece, he's got a knife or whatever. Like,
a lot of people,
you can't just be like, oh, we're gonna just bum rush him.
Yeah, a lot of people in the video commented he didn't even have a weapon. But if you look, I know personally that he had a weapon. I know that for a fact. I saw it. It can be hard to tell in the video. But if you watch, like, there's a couple of times, like when a white van or there's a white truck that comes up the street behind him, you can see when he raises his hand, you can see the piece of rebar. And it was a substantial piece of rebar. And I don't know personally that it was sharpened, but the reports say that he had sharpened it. And from interactions I was hearing from some of our security officers that they've had with the same gentleman in the past, because we get to know a lot of these folks. They hang out at bus stops. They ride the buses quite a bit. And he always had like a shopping cart. And from what some of my security officers were saying, he always had a shopping cart full of items like that, sharpened pieces of rebar and sticks and bats and that kind of thing. He was known to be uncooperative with us and belligerent with us at times. But Yeah, definitely an unfortunate incident. It would be nice if nobody had to lose their life ever in situations like that, but I don't know. I don't know that I would have handled myself differently. I don't know that I would have handled myself the same. It's impossible to put yourself in
Seems
those
like you
shoes,
need
but
some sort of different protocol to. If you come with a bunch, 3 or 4 guys with shields or something,
yeah, that's the
just
thing, right?
fucking pin them to the ground, like something they can't stab through, or like
yeah, and
a
I
net,
think,
throw a net over the guy,
yeah,
like.
yeah,
But
definitely, like,
there's just no call for that. Like we just shoot them, like.
yeah,
And but what else are the officers supposed to do? Although I
yeah,
would say it does look in the video, and it could be deceptive, that he'd actually turned away at the moment,
yeah,
and then he got
and
shot by another officer that wasn't
yeah.
being threatened at
My
the
other
time.
issues, I had a couple of other issues. Like you had 3 or 4 officers off on that right hand side. It seems like a few of those officers should have been out in the street blocking traffic
Right.
because, as you can see in the video, there's cars going back and forth, and that's all. I don't know if you remember here a few months ago the incident with the UPS truck where they opened fire on somebody who had hijacked the UPS truck
No.
and ended up killing. They put like 120 rounds in this UPS truck and ended up killing some motorists in vehicles that were passersby or around the UPS truck.
Yeah,
And so
that's the thing.
it's like, okay, so you've got a slow moving GPS tracked target that you've just ended up killing 2 totally uninvolved people over. First, so people would get their Amazon Prime packages on time. Like that was garbage to me. And at the same time, I look at this one and I'm like, why aren't there officers out there in this instance? If guns are drawn, it seems like immediately a couple of officers should have been out in the street backing people off. I don't
Right.
know. And yeah,
Yeah,
net
there was.
guns, beanbag guns. I don't know. Are all ideas, are all things you can do. But I guess whoever the first people are on the scene, was he an immediate threat to other people around him? I don't know. But I do know that there was already somebody else bloody and unconscious that maybe they were thinking they had to get some medical attention to that guy, and so this threat had to be dealt with before medical personnel could be brought on scene. I don't know. Those are a lot of ifs. I'm making unsubstantiated remarks, but
Yeah, there was an incident in New York and Queens. That was the one of the few discussions I've had with my brother where we got really kind of at an impasse. And they, like, some undercover officers had been in a bar and witnessing a group that were celebrating. There was a bachelor party, and then they got into their car and started leaving. All of a sudden, these undercover officers jump in front of the car and pull out guns, and the car tried to drive off, and they just opened fire, and just murdered it. But there's video of a man with a suitcase up on an elevated platform for a subway, and the bullet goes ricocheting by his head,
yeah,
like just missing. I'm like, what kind of, like, oh, because they thought maybe there was a drug deal that had gone down? Like, are
yeah,
you fucking kidding me? And then the excuse is, well, he had a vehicle and he was going to murder the police officer by running him over. Well, like, you waited till they got into the car and then jumped out in front of
yeah,
like you put the community at risk. Not to mention that these people are part of the community that are celebrating in a
yeah,
bar, and you've decided that that they're criminals, and now you're going to open fire and risk other people's lives
yeah.
in a densely populated city. Like,
And I think part of the issue is I don't think officers, and maybe I'm wrong. I should say I don't think officers are trained well enough on how to de-escalate situations rather than use force in situations. Like your main objective, I think, if you're an officer and you'll pull up on a scene, should be how can I safely resolve this situation for everybody involved? How can I meet this homeless gentleman's needs? What mental conditions are we dealing with here? How can I alleviate his fears and make him peacefully come with us or whatever? And it doesn't seem like that's the immediate objective. It seems like the
Right.
immediate objective usually is how can we end this threat, regardless of the level of violence we need to use as soon as possible.
My understanding is, and of course this is probably could be wrong as well, but my understanding, the police officer is taught how to escalate a situation to take power. So use your verbal commands to be aggressive enough that you over aggressive, you out aggressive the person that you're dealing with. And that's always, that's just going to, a lot of times just escalate it to violence.
Yeah, because a lot of people, especially I imagine people with mental issues already, with problems, mental health problems, are gonna match that they're gonna match that energy. Whatever you're feeding them, they're gonna take it back and amplify it back at you, right?
There was just an incident about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago here, where one of my, I don't know if it was a patient that my wife had seen, but somebody associated that she knew of. The policeman called. He had a piece of rebar, like a full piece of rebar, like a 3 foot, and they shot him, killed him.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, just.
It's unfortunate, and I don't know. I mean, we need to get back to, like I said, a place of community policing where they're there literally as part of the community, as people that are there to de-escalate situations and solve problems, crime-related issues in a community, rather than coming in to enforce laws or things of that nature. I don't know, but I'm not a civil planner or a government planner, or so what the F do I know, right?
That's a lot of work. So well, I got to pause for a second.
Okay. All right, so we're back.
All right. Well, I kind of set up for our show my 3 things: my love, learn, rage. That's kind of my Twitter handle, and kind of maybe forced it into my philosophy of basically love being something that makes me feel connected to the world, makes me lose my sense of just being an isolated individual, part of a community. The learn. Sorry, zombie is barking, which is probably annoying my
squirrel.
Zombie. Anyway, the learn, which I feel is like helping me to move forward in my worldview of kind of how you be in dialogue with somebody instead of debate where you're just defending your position, but be in a dialogue where you can actually learn something new and grow from it. And then rage, where you're just like, that's just outside the bounds of what I consider, humanity, or illogicalness, or whatever. Just a destructive force that needs to be combated. So, my love, I would say, somebody who I felt like I missed in kind of researching philosophers and in psychology is Viktor Frankl.
Okay. Not sure I know. I've heard the name.
It's a UPS truck outside. So if somebody was a police officer, he would open fire.
Definitely.
Guy.
So
Viktor Frankl, he's
Austrian neuroscientist, right? Or neurologist.
Right, and he's I guess the inventor of what they call logotherapy.
Literally healing through meaning, right?
That's his deal. And I guess he was in opposition to the Sigmund Freud school at the time. And but Viktor Frankl was taken as I think, a 16-year-old into a concentration camp.
Yeah.
Where his mother and father and brother were all killed, and he kind of found humanity or his philosophy through the actual living of extreme circumstances. Here's a quote from him: "Is everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." And I kind of see his philosophy and psychology approach is based on real life circumstances where he faced the most horrific thing that anybody could face, is being stripped down naked with nothing and being treated like you're garbage ready to just die.
Mm-hmm.
And I see kind of Sigmund Freud's psychology as somebody who did cocaine. He seems like a guy, if you did a lot of cocaine, that would be your worldview.
Yeah.
And that's what Sigmund Freud did. And it's like, one is based in reality and one is, a slice of truth based on a drug-induced psychosis, which, that's my take. But if you listen to Viktor Frankl, it just seems like a remarkable human being, and did a lot of great things throughout his life, trying to, bring this philosophy forward, and talking about that the real meaning is being able to connect with another human being, and then, in each person it's different, but it's only through that connection and transformation that we really feel satisfied as human beings. One of the quotes recently I heard him talking about his experience in the concentration camps was that the best of us didn't make it out. Those people that were so concerned about other people that they gave up their last piece of bread, because that was their meaning,
Yeah.
Whereas other people just fought to survive for themselves, which is totally understandable. Like, we have to understand that that's how people, are going to react. But ultimately, we have to choose how we're going to react in that situation. So I've been reading his kind of autobiography, and it's pretty excellent to see a picture of a real person who he was an avid mountain climber and
Mm-hmm.
had some success in that realm as well. And he shared one of the things I've been thinking of, that how do you be creative in a world now where everything's recorded and put in a catalog, and be able to retrieve and say, oh no, that's copyright infringement.
Yeah.
One of the issues I have with stand-up comedy is all these people say, oh, you're stealing jokes, and then you go and you're like, well, that's a pretty thin joke. Nobody could have discovered that joke on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking as a young physician. He was being grilled on a certain topic, and saying, well, what is one of the reasons for this topic, and for this condition? And he gave the one that he knew right off the top of his head, and then said, okay, now give me another one. And so he gave him another one, and he said, oh yeah, that's so-and-so theory. That's great. And he's like, he just made it up on the spot, right?
Yeah.
He didn't know that guy had that theory, And I kind of think of myself as, I used to like to play Stratomatic baseball.
Okay.
Where you had the cards,
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, and you
Heard of it, never played it, but yeah.
and arrange it, and it was kind of like a statistic game. So you got to try to figure out how to. So I was never satisfied with the ERA. So I was like, well, to me it makes sense. You want to restrict the number of people on base, right? Because if you give they're more likely to score, they get on base. So if you can get somebody who's just gives up one base runner an inning, like that's pretty good. That would. So I created WHIP, which is now used, like walks
Yeah.
and hits per inning pitched, and that, like when I was using Stratomatic, like that gave you the absolute best picture, because they were gonna, you're less likely to score a run because of an error,
Mm-hmm.
or a home run gives you another run. Like it's like, well, you just come up with these things independently. I think of there's I guess there was a battle between Louis C.K. and
Dane Cook.
yeah, Dan Cook
Yeah.
over. I'm sorry. Oh, a child's name that you can't pronounce. That's so original that nobody else
Yeah.
like. I just want to say, Louis C.K. Yeah, fuck you, man. Like, what the hell, man? Like, really? Like,
Yeah.
I was watching this other video where they're like talking. They were talking about a Bill Cosby routine where he talked about the dad like training the kid to be a football player, and then the kid makes it all the way to the Super Bowl, and then when he's asked, he says, "Thanks, mom." And then he's like, "Oh man," like it was all dad's doing, whatever. And then they played some other comedian who did did a similar joke, whatever. But the weird thing is, when I was like watching it, right when Bill Cosby did the joke, I didn't get it.
Okay.
I didn't understand the joke. Like it wasn't clear. Like
Yeah.
that the whole thing was the juxtaposition of dad did everything, now he's thanking mom. Like I didn't even pick up on that. They showed it, and then they showed the other guy. I was like, well, the other guy was funnier. And I was like, oh, and then I got the joke, and then I'm like, oh, that's what Bill Cosby, like.
Yeah.
It's like, how, like I grew up with Bill Cosby. I never heard that joke. Like you can't come up with that. Like that's such an original idea that dad helps the kid in sports, and then the fact that they
Yeah.
stick the camera and everybody thanks mom. Like that's ridiculous. Like. And that's the copyright world that we're living in. Like,
well, and I think
you
especially
can't even be creative. Like, it's just about gaining position.
I guess in the comedy world, there are certain things that are funny, right? Like situation X and the reaction Y, like, and you just you take out this plug-in and you plug in this thing, and you take out this and you plug in that, and it's still funny, but it's the same joke. It's just maybe you change these names, or you change this location, or you change that premise, but it's the same joke.
But you're going to be, no matter what, like you're pulling from your life and humor. You're always going to be stealing from somebody. Like we went to that. Came to Portland. I was going to do the stand up, and we went to the the wine bar, and it was just horrible. Like the first two comedians were so drunk they could barely like talk, and it was kind of. We were the only people there. I was just feeling so uncomfortable. But there was a couple of comedians that told a couple of funny lines. It's like, there's no way I can not use those, And who knows that they're theirs originally, right?
Yeah.
So the one guy was from New York. He's like, "Hey, I'm walking here," like that's a standard thing. Like, like, "Hey, I'm walking here," like that's a great line. Like, now I can't ever say that. I'm not going to be able to not say that,
Right.
And then there was the one female comedian, and she's like, "Okay, everybody, look to the person to your left. All right, now look to the person to your left. Look to your person to your right. I have hemorrhoids." Right? It's like, well, that's that's a funny. Like, is that hers originally? Like, I even had hemorrhoid joke in my.
Right.
It's like, yeah, you want to like. I would be like, like I can see there's a point if you just like totally lifted. Like if you just came from one venue and you went to the next venue, and the guy just lifted your whole freaking act.
Well, that was
like, I'm not saying there's no like stealing like that. But like, man, it's getting like really thin. Like, where you're like, oh, that's a joke. Like the joke premise is the way you deliver it and the audience and.
Well, and so talking about the copyright thing and looping it around, I think you had sent me the link here a while back that some guys had programmed an algorithm, an AI, to basically create every melody available.
Every melody.
Yeah, and then they recorded it onto a hard drive, which technically gives them the copyright to every melody that exists.
Right.
Other than the ones
they're trying to break the copy. They're trying to say copyright is bullshit. So that they're trying to do they're not trying to get money off. Like they're trying to say this
system
nonsense.
is broken.
And anybody, I guess anybody who's in music knows the same thing. Like you hear songs and they're like, oh, that's copyright. Now you got to pay this other artist. And it's like you listen to 2 songs, you're like, they don't sound anything fucking alike.
No, yeah.
And there's, and my brother is a musician. He's like, well, there's only so many chords.
Yeah.
And in a certain, in a certain genre or whatever, like the chord is a certain chord progressions, like.
Yeah.
But that's just trying to capitalize or financialize on things and trying to squashing creativity.
You got to monetize everything, right?
The Walt Disney copyright rule. It used to be like copyright was like 7 years, and then you could extend it, or it seems like a reasonable time. Now it's like fucking 99 years after death or whatever the hell it is. Like, come on, man. It's just like, oh, like you're just killing creativity.
Yeah. Well, and you got to monetize everything in order to maximize the profit in the system, right? It's
right.
If we're not finding a way to make money off of every single little thing, we're not doing it right.
So my learn is I watched a YouTube, maybe it was a TEDx talk, of Ruben Meerman.
Okay.
And that's got to be awesome, because if you start to Google it and you write Ruben, the first thing that comes up is Reuben Sandwich. So kudos to a guy who has.
That was the second
name.
thing for me.
What was the first thing?
Reuben Langdon, who was an American stuntman.
You must be looking up stuntman when I started to Google it. Reuben Sandwich was the first. I must have looked up.
I'm not gonna get into
they know what I like.
Google algorithm. What
they
my
know
Google
I like Reuben sandwiches, I guess. But so he had lost some weight. He had had been motivated to lose some weight, but then he's like, well, where did the weight go? Like, how do you actually like lose weight? Like, what is the mechanism of losing weight? And it's funny because I asked my wife, and after I learned from this guy where the weight actually goes, and she didn't like it at first because it's like he said, it's a gap in our diet, in our health literacy.
Okay.
Right. So we know a lot, about, okay, we eat calories, we eat fat, it stores the fat, we gain the weight, but when we're losing weight, like, where does it actually go? And, the answer is, we burn it. It's like, that's not really possible, because you're talking about atoms, right? So you're talking about matter. So how do you get rid of matter? You don't have antimatter.
No.
Like, you don't actually get rid of it. So the answer is that you actually breathe it out. So we breathe in oxygen, O2, and then we breathe out CO2, and it's that carbon atom that weighs more than the air that we breathe in. And that's basically it. And then we can, so it really doesn't matter, what you eat, right? Like, for that standpoint, for weight, right? Because whatever the calories in, whatever carbon atoms you have, carbohydrates, and carbohydrates, fat, proteins can all transfer into carbon atoms. And then, but if you eat like crappy food, you don't have any nutrients, so you're also going to become sicklier in other ways. But basically, the amount that we take in, we're going to have to breathe it out. So it's like you have to eat less and move more. And as you become in better shape, you're breathing more and you're becoming more efficient in that transfer of the putting oxygen into your blood.
Oxygenation.
Oxygenating your blood, and then transferring the CO2 that you then breathe out. So I thought that was pretty fascinating, and he worked with a medical researcher who helped. They wrote up a short paper about it, and now he's on a crusade to kind of teach younger people about the different molecules and how they work, what we eat, how they bind, what the protein molecules are, so that like can educate people, not be kind of mystified by the.
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty cool. That's you just gotta breathe out more. But he's like, oh, once you tell people that, then they start hyperventilating. Then you're not actually breathing out. You're just you're sucking in too much CO2. You're not actually that efficient.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty
All
cool.
right. Excellent.
No.
So then my rage for the week, I guess I had two different ones. The first real one was that I guess it's got pretty widespread attention in the media, I guess, as these two doctors in Bakersfield in California that
Okay.
presented themselves as ER doctors and kind of were saying that we need to open up stuff because statistically the coronavirus is nothing different than the flu, and we're just destroying the whole world based on our misunderstanding of data.
Yeah.
And so my wife was listening to this like last week. I heard her listening to you guys, and I could tell right away they were cherry picking information.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like fighting back, just like this is bullshit. Like this is not, they're just picking out, and they pick out whatever countries they want, and like Norway and Sweden, and being like, oh, they didn't do any. They're saying that isolation didn't work, and like, and not even now. I've seen even more. That they didn't even drill down in the data that did provide, because Sweden has a much higher death rate than Norway.
Yeah.
So like they didn't even, and it turns out, I mean, they just own a string of urgent care clinics, and they're just out for their own financial gain, and they're just presenting themselves as experts and trying to say Dr. Fauci, is he doesn't treat patients. That's the difference between ivory tower people and people on the ground. Well, people on the ground that are not actually dealing with what's going on, like.
Yeah.
Like it's so frustrating. My friend she's like head of chaplaincy of a hospital group in New York. It's like 23 hospitals. Like, you got to be kidding me if you think this is no different.
Yeah. No.
Than the flu. You're not even fucking paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and several of the, just quick points is first of all, it's much more contagious.
Mm-hmm.
Because with the flu, you have to be showing symptoms for a couple of days before you're even infectious. And, with the COVID, as far as we could tell, like you're infectious before you even know it, or even if you never know.
Yeah. You can be totally asymptomatic and be shedding.
That you're carrying it. The hospital stay is like twice as long.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually treatments for the flu. We don't have any treatments for the for COVID-19, and these guys were just pulling everything out of their ass. Like they're like, oh, back in the biblical times in the leprosy, we just quarantined the lepers.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take our medical advice on a 2,000-year-old religious book. Okay, good one there. That's your data,
right?
That's your fucking data point. Like.
Well, and the problem is that kind of information and thinking spreads. I was walking behind two of my bus drivers at one of our transit centers the other day, and they were talking, and one of them literally said, oh, the flu kills 60,000 people every year, and this has already killed 60,000 people. Why are we doing all this lockdown? And I'm like, are you even listening to yourself? Like, the flu kills 60,000 with no
without
other lockdown. Yeah. Imagine had we not done this, where we would be death-wise. We could be well past 150,000 dead or more had we not taken any measures, right?
And by everything, it looks like problem in New York is they started the quarantine too late. Like, maybe 10 days earlier, like they could have like stopped a lot of it, but they weren't able to do that, and it's just like devastating.
And the problem is, you saw people predicted it and said, if all these quarantine measures work, people are going to come out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, we didn't have to quarantine at all. Look how few people died in place X or whatever." And so you see now, I saw that from several people, and there seems, if there's a Venn diagram of crazy people that believe that kind of shit, it seems to overlap a lot with the people we talked about last week, the QAnon folks and the anti-vax folks and all of that. It's like, what are you, like, really? And they're already, I see them posting stuff. Oh, if you want to stay at home and be afraid of the virus, that's fine. But it should be my choice if I want to go to restaurants and get haircuts and do this and that. And it's like, but your freedom ends at my safety, right? Your ability to swing your fist ends at my face.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily worried for myself. I'm trying to, participate and do my civic responsibility to not spread it and to not to not be part of the problem. I always go back to the lifeboat. We're all like in a lifeboat, and then somebody's drilling a hole in the bottom of the lifeboat. Don't tell me what to do. I can do whatever I want with my part of the lifeboat. Like, no, you'll fucking sink the entire fucking lifeboat. And that's not a great analogy because we're not going to sink the entire lifeboat. But that's that's the thought experiment. Like, you don't live in isolation. You live in a social group, and I get that. I get that it's difficult and that there's no hard edges, and that's the problem. People want to snap to a certainty, and I mean, these guys are like, oh, you go to Lowe's is still open, you can go to Lowe's and spread, like, no, we didn't stop the total transmission of this. We're trying to slow it down.
Trying to make it so that the healthcare system doesn't get overwhelmed.
Arizona did a great job in shutting down the spring training. Can you imagine if that had ripped through the spring training? A bunch of they're all old fucking white people.
Yeah, right.
I went to a spring training game. There are no black people there. There were 2 black people in the entire audience. 2 in the whole stadium. They're all old white. They would have fucking all died. Imagine that on everybody's hand. Like, they did a great job in like slowing it down, and because
it all together in Arizona in this time of year when snowbirds start pouring back into town, and I mean, that whole population is going to be at risk, especially those people that come early for spring training, and then it just Sun City and Glendale would be decimated, Apache Junction gone, but all these retirement communities just absolutely decimated.
So my other rage was, so out of the blue, I got a text from Bob.
Okay.
Remember?
Yep.
Remember Bob from playing poker?
Yeah.
I haven't heard from him in almost a year and a half. All of a sudden, he texts me out of the blue, and then he's like, "All right, keep safe. I'm gonna, go get some of that Pine Sol, or go into the laundry room and get some of that good shit, the bleach, and drink it." And I'm just thinking, I had not heard about anything. Like, I didn't know. I thought he was just drunk texting. I'm like, what the hell? What kind of psychotic break? So then my wife comes home, and then she's like, oh, yeah, Trump was saying with the disinfectants, and then she shares the article, like, with me. She sends it to me, and I read it. And I'm like, I'm not seeing the drinking bleach in this statement, I'm seeing somebody awkwardly talk about an infection and then using disinfection, which is not a term that you would use medically, even though that's basically what you're doing, right? An infection, you want to get rid of the infection, right? You're going to disinfect it, right? Like, and the way that this is like gotten picked up and like just run with by people, like all these memes, and it's like, I want to join in too, because it's, because of course I understand that Trump is, not a smart man. Like, he's a rich man. He's like a 12-year-old boy who never got told no. And he just like, I mean, after the Parkland shooting, and he had the people at the White House trying to do talk about what kind of solutions were. And then he didn't even know that you could go buy an AR-15.
Yeah.
He didn't know the semi-automatic weapon. Like, those are legal. You thought those are restricted. Like, he doesn't even know the first thing about anything.
No.
Like, why anybody would look to him? Why anybody would like if you're in the rage mode, like, why would you watch his press conference every day looking for rage?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is beyond me. But like, I think if people are like hurting themselves because it's more because of the reaction towards it. And it's almost like, well, if these liberal pinheads say that drinking bleach isn't a good idea, then maybe it is. Maybe Trump did say that. Maybe I should drink it. Like, I'm not saying that's even happening, but
no.
Like, you're just escalating, and it's just like everything is a political football to everything with the coronavirus, like with the hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
Trump is just trying to he's trying to offer some help to people, and this drug seems possible, so he's like, oh, maybe this is a good drug. And then like everybody's like jumping on it, like, oh, now we just have to disprove what he said, that this drug is no good. And you got the dude, Dr. Sanjay, is that his name? Gupta?
Sanjay Gupta, yeah.
Sanjay Gupta on CNN coming out with a study saying that that hydroxychloroquine in a Veterans Administration, study, it showed that it had an increased death rate.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, yada yada yada. And he tried to hedge his bet a little bit, saying, "Oh, this was a small study,
mm-hmm.
and maybe it wasn't." But it was 367 people, so it wasn't that small. And then more research is needed. Well, I listen to I like to listen to the YouTube channel MedCram.
Yep.
And he goes over stuff in just a scientific way. I mean, today he had a webinar, and you could get free CME credits, which are for physicians that they need every year to keep up with their education. It's free hour and a half, and you have to pay a lot for these, so that's pretty significant. And even he went back over some of the hydroxychloroquine studies and was saying, well, this is a political football now,
Mm-hmm.
But he went over that VA study, and it was what they call a retrospective study. So it wasn't created to see if hydroxychloroquine was effective or not. They just went over and looked back at the patients who had gotten it. And the only patients, and mostly the patients who had gotten it, were much more sick than the patients who hadn't. So obviously they're more likely to die than the other patients. And, the patients who weren't sick or were not given that drug. And it says it right in the paper itself,
Yeah.
But Sanjay Gupta, Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN, he's got to refute Trump's hydroxychloroquine quote, so he doesn't bother to mention that it's a retrospective study and that it's not statistically significant. And if you go down, because you have to see that the groups are alike. If the groups in the study that didn't receive it or did receive it are not alike, then there's not a statistical significance, But it's this sort of stuff that's happening like all the time. It's frustrating,
and it's on both sides.
It doesn't take that much.
It just reinforces
that much to delve down into the science, and if you're a reporter or somebody or a freaking doctor on CNN,
Well, and then that just gives the other side ammo to say, oh, look how fucking these liberals or whatever they're calling us this week, libtards. And the same thing when Fox News, posts their crap and we look at it and call them a bunch of Republicans or whatever. And it just reinforces everybody's beliefs, right? And separates us even further apart.
Yeah, I heard a good phrase talking about rage. Talking about the entrepreneurship of rage. That seems like a thing now. Right?
Yeah.
You can just deal in that. All you got to do is just. And I felt like we saw it when we first started the Not Terrible Show, and we had our Twitter feed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as long as we were on the right side of the rage, we were gonna, we were starting to pick up some momentum. But as soon as it was the Peter Lang case in the police shooting in Brooklyn.
Yep. I remember.
where I had kind of inside knowledge of like what had actually happened, and just be like, this is just a tragedy, like all around. And certainly the circumstances around the whole thing, the living conditions
Mm-hmm.
of the apartments where they put poor people to live with, and then they send police officers in there just to patrol and just go to the rooftop and come back down, and the lights being off. And like, it's just a total, like, you can indict the system as being totally corrupt and at fault, but to take the rookie officer who was trying to do the right thing under the circumstances and just make him out to be a monster who just shot somebody dead and then just left him to die, and just like, it's not reality. Once you deal in reality at all, in any kind of nuance, you're done. Then the rage monsters are just there after you. Now you're the enemy.
Yep. No, that's
So there's no
true.
reason to even try to be, there's definitely no reason to try to pander to anybody's idea, unless you're just going to stay on the one side or the other. And that's what the media has to do. MSNBC's got to stay on the one side of the corporate capitalist state, and Fox News got to stay on the the side of the billionaire cuckoo class with with religious nuts as their base. Totally not provocative language there.
And with that language, we will call this one good, I think. Anything else you wanted to add for this week?
That's it. I'm good.
That'll do it. All right. Excellent. So thank you for joining us this week for the Not Terrible Show. I'm Eric.
And I'm Matthew.
Have a great one.
One Earth, one people.
There we go.